Chapter number 10. Back to do what a cockerel has to do. Word had made it to Pedro that the English had lost their cockerel. Generally, the Portuguese man carefully monitored the ratio of male birds to female ones that he kept, and over the years he had become an expert at spotting from an early age which cockerels would be trouble, ensuring that they ended up on the table before causing problems by trying to rule the roost. However, quite without explanation, a couple of months earlier his two roosters had died, and Pedro was helped out by a neighbour who offered him one of his. Since that time he had reared a couple more male birds and found that the older resident was not very happy with the new dynamics. Pedro liked the two Englishmen who he had sold firewood to, and decided that when he next saw them he would ask them if they wanted a cockerel to replace the one they had recently lost. It was more than mere coincidence when that bird from our neighbours was actually the spitting image of our first cockerel. Flake's time away seemed to have made him more amiable, and he settled back in with Patrick and Trilby much more easily than before. He and the hen hit it off so well, in fact, that before long the feathery family grew. 2 little chicks were the result of the match, and although one drowned before it was a day old, the other grew into a lovely looking hen which had her father's good looks and the sweeter side of her mother's nature. Thinking of Sid, we never did know if it was a male or female, so Sid we thought would suffice for both. Made me smile. I would never be able to forget the sight of the little chicken when he or she first appeared. And also on the day that, after we'd returned from a day out with friends, there she was, completely bored and looking oven ready. Everyone who witnessed the scene liked to think that there was no malice in Merlina's actions, and the bird certainly did not seem afraid of the dog. But to say the men, Stephen and me, and our guests were the only ones in shock would not be the truth. That inner smile grabbed my consciousness, and I was momentarily back in St. Nicholas's Chapel. Being back there in the present, I began to understand that emotions, loyalties, and a sense of belonging and love, in other words, living, were indeed misty lands in which to travel. That the feathery and furry family Stephen and I had collected around us over the years was different to that of our neighbours' animals took just minutes to understand. As for the heads of the family, there was little doubt in either of our two minds that we had been accepted and were a valuable part of everyday life in Potato and within the wider area. The locals accepted the differences they found within us two recently arrived Englishmen, and they understood that Stephen and me were not like many of the other foreigners who headed for an easier life in Portugal. Our sexuality was something which they knew about, but which was considered far less important than the fact that we had learnt the language, cultivated a few basic crops, and always stopped to pass the time of day. In the environment that we lived in, our unconventional approach to animal husbandry was something that raised a smile, and the most curmudgeonly were often caught off guard by the affection that we displayed towards our funny family. So it's 2 short chapters today, but we actually move it on to part 3 of the book tomorrow, which is called Eyes on Potato. So until tomorrow.